Mr. Patterson, how you doing? I hope all your PGA Championship wagers went well.
Let's see. I was in on Will Zalatoris.
You did
to have a good showing. I think Max Homa finished around T12 or something like that.
Oh, did he?
But
did he?
Yeah, he had a pretty strong finish, but the absence of having Justin Thomas on my fantasy team was ultimately why I was not able to claim the this round in my major championship fantasy league. So I'm still in the top 5 on the season, but I have yet to have a winner. So that just means we're all focused going into the U.S. Open to be able to close that gap.
You're due, and you're due. We'll talk about the PGA in our second segment. I want to deal with some NCAA stuff. You know how I view all of these issues. If I roll emojis everywhere.
Sure.
So Lane Kiffin is a believer in this. I guess it's not a phenomenon. This result from this massive influx of name, image, and likeness. He says that NIL is widening the gap or creating a gap not just between Group of 5 and Power 5 schools, but within the Power 5. He sees it as 3 tiers. Well, top 10 teams, elite NIL resources, and the rest of the top 25, if you will, with just normal NIL resources, and then everyone else. My question to you is, how is this different from college football over the last 20 years?
Because of something that Lane Kiffin has taken advantage of, even and claimed to be analytically advanced on,
right,
which is the transfer portal. Because you're right that the programs that have the most resources have gotten the best talent out of high school and have fielded some of the most talented teams. But what we have not had until now is the ability, or at least the easier path for a player to go and seek playing time elsewhere. And, we've got Jackson Dart, of course, the quarterback from USC. Yeah. He signed to be with Ole Miss. Their starting running back is going to be, I guess, Ulysses Bentley, who was for SMU last year, one of the best running backs in the American Athletic Conference. And Lane Kiffin has said, what we are looking at is taking proven players from the transfer portal over offering scholarships to high school players. And so I think that that's another wrinkle to look, the programs who have, because he believes that, what do you say, 100% of high school decisions are being made based on where they can get the most NIL money. I don't think it's 100%, but I understand that he's trying to make a point here that, they're just shopping the market. Who can give me the most money? That's going to be where I'll sign. But I'm interested in the next part of it, which is, okay, you've signed with that program. Now you've got an easier path than ever to be able to leave if things aren't working out. And that's where it's funny to hear Lane Kiffin talk about that, because he is then able to provide a landing spot where we're going to be offering NIL opportunities to proven players. So those are the 2 levels that stand out to me, is the inducements, which are technically against these NCAA rules and at the core of a lot of what the Nick Saban-Jimbo Fisher spat was about. But then the next level to it, which is when you do have freedom of movement, when you do have more transfers, how about these programs that are just deciding we are not going to recruit high school players like we used to? We're just not going to care about investing those that NIL money. I mean, it used to be your time, your wink resources,
right?
But now they are telling the collectives and they are telling some of these boosters, we might want to invest in proven products. So it is a multi-layered impact of name, image, and likeness that, paired with the transfer portal and freedom of movement, has created what Lane Kiffin has said is a very professionalized environment.
Which, there's a lot of money in college sports. I'm 100% in favor of that money, at least in some of it, maybe a lot of it, going to the people that we watch on the television.
And so is Kiffin.
Right.
That's the thing that's so interesting about his position, is he is a head coach in the SEC with a long track record of multiple stops, and he was an assistant under Nick Saban. And of coaches with his kind of resume and profile, he's the only one who starts question and answer sessions with, "I'm in favor of paying the players."
Right. Let me just ask this question, because and maybe I'm characterizing Lane Kiffin into, in a way, complaining, making critical assessments of the current landscape. Because, and the reason I asked the initial question the way I did to you was that over the modern history of college football, let's just keep it in college football, the modern history of college football, which to me is like mid-90s, the BCS era, it's just vastly different. We've always had these tiers. I mean, in many ways, the college football playoff era has like narrowed the top, where we've had essentially two teams basically every year, three sort of with Clemson, but it's basically been Alabama and Ohio State. Clemson certainly had a great run, and we'll see if they continue. And if we want to throw Clemson in there, we can, and Oklahoma. But for the most part, it's been two teams. And then, we have maybe one or two others, and then we have some, look what just happened this year. Washington, Michigan State, blah, blah, blah. Cincinnati, I guess. So I actually think that we're just moving the furniture around. We're just changing the teams. If we go back far enough, we go, oh, wait, look, Nebraska was good. Oregon was great. And maybe they're not so great anymore, and Nebraska's terrible, which we'll talk about Nebraska in a minute. So I just don't see what's really different today except the mechanisms that are driving teams.
I think the SEC and the Big Ten could pull away, and that's not like we are starting to see from avenues
financially, they absolutely could.
But even in the number of NFL draft picks, like the Big 12 is falling apart, the Pac-12 is falling behind, and the ACC, which once was right there with the SEC and a lot of its NFL draft pick type competitiveness, is starting to slip just a little bit too. I mean, the ACC is very much on that pivot point right now, where the hope is that some of these new hires that we have, at Virginia Tech, at Miami, that is going to solidify, or that even Mike Norvell, as you're waiting to see if he's going to be able to get things going at Florida State, that they are going to be able to boost the ACC from just really being left behind and being closer to the Big 12 and the Pac-12. I think that there used to be, before the money really went up, I think there used to be a little bit more of an evenly dispersed collection of powers. And now the question that I'm asking myself, my colleagues, and those around college football is, how big a deal are the media rights distributions being so different? And if the answer is it is a big deal, just look at the NFL draft picks, just look at the on-field success, that is where you're seeing it play out. Well, then it's not like it always used to be, because at least we did have tiers, but at least those tiers were dispersed across the country. At least those tiers were dispersed across different conferences. And I think that right now, sort of the existential crisis is whether the SEC, especially with Texas and Oklahoma joining, whether that's just its own tier and that everybody else is playing a different game.
But here, I think the way this plays out, it should actually be more spread out. If USC has tons of resources, right? Even if we're just talking, maybe not as a school, but the schools are not allowed. So it doesn't even matter if the Big Ten gets $60 million per school in a payout from the Big Ten Network and ESPN and Fox. It doesn't even matter if they're distributing that kind of money, because they're not allowed to use their money for inducements. They're not allowed to create their own collective, if you will. Southern Cal. I mean, look,
the recruiting budget matters.
But if we're not recruiting, if we're no longer spending all that time and effort into recruiting high schools, they've always had that edge in recruiting the high schools and throwing a blanket and developing bigger coaching staffs, paying their strength and conditioning coaches crazy money. But if Kiffin is talking about NIL and all of that is third party, whether it's corporate money or individual booster money that is used as inducements to get people to come to school, then all you really need is deep pocket investors, if you will, in a separate entity, and you should be able to compete. On top of the fact that, first of all, I think we're looking at these things through the immediacy of year 1, 2, 3. As opposed to let it breathe over the long haul. the number one concern over all of these players is always going to be, how can I get to the real money, which is the NFL? So,
sure.
And ultimately, I think
I don't think the deep pocket boosters and the investors are at the places that get less media rights money. I think there's a very loose line between how much, what kind of program, what kind of brand you are, and how much money you're going to be able to pull together for name, image, and likeness type opportunities. I think there are very few ACC schools that are going to be able to really pull everything together on the college football side to create competitive name, image, and likeness offers. Like you better be selling your university. You better be selling your campus or your program or your coaches. You better be selling the things that are outside of name, image, and likeness, because I think there is somewhat of a connection between these huge, massive SEC and Big Ten universities and the way they treat college football and how much they invest in college football, and the presence of third parties that are willing to pony up competitive money as well.
Which, again, I just keep thinking that doesn't really sound any different than what we have had over the course of the last 2 decades. I think we might have new players. Maybe Texas A&M becomes a Georgia. Maybe, right? Maybe they become a Georgia, right?
Texas A&M's had oil money for decades. Best they can do is come in like second or third place in the division. No, they are meant for this. Texas A&M is going to always be in this position where they are spending so much money and caring so deeply and not winning national championships. Like, you can be better than the number 1 or number 2 spender in NIL. You can be able to accumulate the right amount of talent, but you better have like a transcendent quarterback and a unique, like, it is the very specific recipe to be able to overcome all of these competitive disadvantages, whether they are third party, whether they are through the university, whether it's Nick Saban being the first to build out a massive support staff. That's what I think Jimbo Fisher said when he's like, hey, why don't you go ask him about parity? What he was remembering is all of the minions that, I'm not going to say spy, but if you spend enough time breaking down tape, like, you can really put together a detailed report. And I think that Nick Saban was one of the first to be like, if I've got more people thinking about my opponents than anybody else, I'm going to go and create an advantage. And I think that was one of the things that Jimbo was referencing. And I think that as the money just continues to go up, it will be the places that care the most on NIL and non-NIL that are creating these competitive advantages.
All right, so let me ask this question, because we're in a transition time. Chip Patterson every Wednesday is here. We're in a transition period. Mark Emmert, thankfully, is going away. We don't know how much longer we've got of Mark Emmert. My guess is that as soon as they find the next Mark Emmert, the current Mark Emmert will kind of fade off into the ether, and it can't happen soon enough. But I also wonder if the NCAA is going to take heed of the changing landscape and bring in somebody who thinks differently, because I still can't believe that we're talking about guardrails. I just can't believe that these people are that naive to think that this doesn't have to be a dramatically different system. So I have no idea what's going to happen. But what could the NCAA do to discourage these collectives from essentially just outright paying the players? And again, I am in favor of paying them, but what could they do to rein that in?
You hear John Ruiz. John Ruiz is a big Miami athletics booster and was at the center of the Isaiah Wong story.
Oh, right. Yes.
The $400,000 deal. Then all of a sudden I need to get more money if somebody else is going to be getting $400,000. John Ruiz, when he heard that the NCAA was going to come in, like, laughed and tweeted something to the effect of, like, I've got lawyers too.
Yeah.
Like, these very wealthy individuals, these collectives that have been put together, they have means, and they are going through the process of trying to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. Heck, one of the things that I'm concerned about is that these collectives are trying to protect themselves so much that some of these deals are a disadvantage legally to the players that they are drawing up these deals with. Again, like you said, in favor of the finances that the players are getting, and think they should be I think they should be getting them from the school as part of the media rights deal as well.
Yes.
But I just think the NCAA is in a position where they're going to try to come after some of these, and the collectives and the boosters and those responsible for arranging these name, image, and likeness deals, not all of them, but many of them, and especially the most prominent ones, they've got lawyers too.
Yeah.
And I think they're like, no, really, come for us. We'll sue you tomorrow. And there's no way that the NCAA should feel confident at all in its ability to stand in any courtroom and be able to argue that what they are doing is not against the ideals of the free market.
If I keep hitting myself in the head with a brick, I mean, I'm going to continue to do damage to myself. And the NCAA, if I'm not mistaken, this figure is pretty accurate. They have spent $320 million on legal fees in the last 7 years, and they keep losing. And they keep losing.
It's like Texas A&M.
The NCAA is Texas A&M.